The story of the YMCA is a story of service, innovation, and leadership. It is a story of dedication to youth, family, and community, to healthy living, and to social responsibility. There is far more to cover than what we can do in a few minutes. However, we'd like to share some highlights and achievements of the YMCA movement. We think that you'll find it surprising as well as inspirational.
The YMCA was founded in London at the end of the Industrial Revolution. Tens of thousands of young men had migrated from the countryside to London to work in the factories. They worked 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. With the little free time they had, most men spent their time at taverns or engaged in other activities considered Christian vices. George Williams and 11 of his co-workers wanted to extend God's grace to young men who were losing their way in the city. They held Bible study classes, and this began the Young Men's Christian Association. Little did they know that this was the beginning of a worldwide movement. 2 years later, in 1851, the Y came to the USA. A retired Boston Sea captain, Thomas Valentine Sullivan, noticed a similar need to create a safe home away from home for sailors and merchants. Inspired by the stories of the Y in England, he led the formation of the first U.S. YMCA in Boston. At the same time, Anthony Bowen, a freed slave, was a leader in the African American community in Washington, D.C. His home was an underground railroad station, and he started one of the few schools for African Americans in the U.S. In 1853, he went on to found the first African American YMCA. The first YMCAs called themselves an organization by young men, for young men. Although young men were the initial focus of the Y, they were quick to understand that, as Theodore Roosevelt said, if you are going to do anything for the average man, you have to begin before he is a man. In 1881, Ellen Brown was hired as the first paid full-time secretary at a Y in the U.S. Her job was to teach night school to boys. This became known as Boys' Work, the beginning of the Y's focus on youth. Father's Day was started at the Y in the early 1900s, an outgrowth of what had become the Y's emphasis on father and son programming. The Boy Scouts, another outgrowth of father and son programming, was started at the Y in 1910 to teach boys patriotism, courage, self-reliance, and kindred values. The Y's work extended to girls in 1923 with the start of the Tri-High Girls Clubs, focusing on the development of high school girls. The Y was also intricately involved in childcare throughout the early part of the 1900s, understanding the need to help working parents. Mindful of the times and the mandate to adjust to community need, the Y stepped away after the advent of public schools in the 1900s. As the phenomenon of latchkey kids grew in the 1960s, the Y stepped back into childcare, providing a variety of after-school educational and sports programs which have continued to this day. Part of this effort is National Healthy Kids Day, which was started in 1992. It emphasizes the importance of play and physical activity in children's health and development. The YMCA Youth and Government Program was established in 1936 in New York by Clement P. Duran, then the Boys' Work Secretary for the Albany YMCA. The organization's mission is to help create the next generation of thoughtful, committed, and active citizens by teaching them the principles of a democratic society. They also intend to create leaders through their roles in the models of local, state, and national government. The premise is that leaders are developed by doing. Today, the YMCA of the East Bay continues a vibrant youth and government program that has nearly 500 participants. The early Y organizers realized that gymnasiums were a popular way to attract new members. This resulted in the expansion of the Y's focus from its spiritual and intellectual beginnings to the inclusion of the physical and social. Did you know that Robert Roberts, a YMCA staffer, coined the term bodybuilding in 1881? or that James Naismith, a physical education instructor at the YMCA training school in Springfield, Massachusetts, invented basketball. In 1891, he was given 2 weeks to come up with an indoor winter game. He hung peach baskets from the bottom of a second-level running track, and thus basketball was born. Not long afterwards, another Y instructor at the same institution, in an effort to develop a game considered less strenuous than basketball, created mintonette, which later evolved into volleyball. Many swimming innovations began at the Y. In answer to a challenge to teach every man and boy in America to swim, George Corson arrived at the Detroit Y in 1909 with a radical new teaching method, group swimming lessons. In Newark, New Jersey, he was able to teach 800 boys to swim in just 4 weeks. Did you know that indoor swimming pools were conceived at the YMCA? Or that the first professional football game included an African-American team from the Y? Or that Joe Sobek invented racquetball in 1950 and made its first home in a YMCA in Greenwich, Connecticut. And we can't forget that in 1969, the first jazzercise classes were started by Judy Shepard Missett at a YMCA in suburban Chicago.
Now to the right knee, to the left, and hold it right there. Good.
From the beginning, the YMCA has focused on helping those in need. President Abraham Lincoln held a conference with the U.S. Christian Commission during the Civil War, which led to the full-scale recruitment of 5,000 YMCA volunteer surgeons, nurses, and chaplains, which would later become known as the Armed Services Y. Throughout World War I, the YMCA provided welfare services to the military. By war's end, the Y had operated 1,500 canteens in the U.S. and France, set up 4,000 recreational and religious structures, and raised more than the equivalent of $4.3 billion for relief work. The first organization for African American men was a YMCA, and in 1910, Carter Woodson created Negro History Week, now known as Black History Month, while residing at the Wabash YMCA in Chicago. In the 1870s, the YMCA started a number of specialized Ys. The first YMCA for Native Americans was founded in 1879 in South Dakota, and by 1885, there were 25 Indian Ys. The first Chinese YMCA was founded in San Francisco in 1875. English as a second language classes were first started for Germans at the Y, as was Toastmasters, the program designed to help members with public speaking. During World War II, the YMCA, along with 5 other national voluntary organizations, founded the United Service Organizations for National Defense, today known as the USO. When 110,000 Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps during World War II, David Tatsuno, a Y volunteer, secretly documented life in the internment camps. His footage was later compiled into the film Topaz. Fred Hoshiyama was a young Y youth worker interred at Topaz Camp. Here he is talking about his work in the internment camps.
And as soon as we got in, we noticed that the kids are just running around wild because there's no structure any longer. There's no community program, nothing, just nothing. And I asked some of my fellow YMCA folks on the Japanese YMCA that we had padlocked in San Francisco, and I said, look, we gotta do something for these kids. And they said, yeah, let's do something. So as YMCA people, we do whatever needs to be done. And we started YMCAs in camp without calling it the YMCA. So I call it YMCA without walls and without staff, just volunteers. That's all you require, volunteer in the spirit. And I call that the power of and the magic of the YMCA spirit.
The YMCA was in the forefront of the civil rights movement in the latter part of the 20th century, supporting efforts to desegregate both within and outside the Y. The first LGBT family night in the country was held at our very own Berkeley YMCA in 1998. And in the fall of 2017, the YMCA's launched a nationwide disaster relief response to aid Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria. The present-day YMCA of the East Bay has evolved over more than 100 years. The Oakland YMCA was founded in 1879, providing housing, recreation, and support for thousands of young men. In 1903, the Berkeley Y was founded, and in 1910, the building of the downtown Berkeley Y was completed. William Waste, a young attorney, was the first president of the Berkeley Y, and later became Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. Many Ys were built throughout Alameda and Contra Costa counties in the ensuing years. In 1990, the YMCA of Alameda County and the West Contra Costa County YMCA joined to become the YMCA of the East Bay. The Irvin Deutscher Family Y joined the Berkeley Albany Y in 2010 and became the YMCA of the Central Bay Area. And in 2017, the YMCA of the Central Bay Area and the YMCA of the East Bay merged under the name the YMCA of the East Bay. Fran Galati is the president and CEO of the new YMCA of the East Bay. The Y continues to be a powerful association of people of all ages and from all walks of life, joined together by a commitment to strengthen communities and to ensure that every individual has access to the essentials needed to learn, grow, and thrive.